Coming up on Network Africa. African Union's multinational standby force to begin training in South Africa in preparation for crisis response across the continent. Sudan sends ground troops to Yemen to boost Saudi-led coalition. And it's the case of mistaken identity as alleged gunman in Israeli bus station attack, identified as an Eritrean migrant. Hello and welcome to Network Africa. I am Adeshewa Josh. Before we take you through our lineup of stories for today, here's a report of the stories that made headlines over the weekend. The African Union's Peace and Security Council on Saturday has asked the organization to speed up plans to send troops to Burundi if violence in the Central African nation worsens, and has called for investigations into rights abuses there. The Peace and Security Council has also decided to impose targeted sanctions, including a travel ban and asset freeze against all the Burundian stakeholders whose actions and statements contribute to the perpetration of violence. Burundi has suffered months of violent turmoil since President Pierre Nkurunziza announced in April he would seek a third term, a move that triggered protests and a failed coup. And in Burkina Faso, a senior military justice official has confirmed the leader of last month's failed coup, General Gilbert Diendere, has been charged with crimes against humanity. According to for crimes against humanity, and he says he is formally charged with 23 other people. Finally, Pope Francis will meet slum dwellers and refugees, and he will call for dialogue between Christians and Muslims when he visits Kenya, Uganda, and Central African Republic next month in his first ever visit to Africa. The trip is fraught with security concerns, and the Pope will spend about 2 days in each country as he visits only the capitals. Speaking to a gathering of priests from around the world, the pontiff said he wanted to add Kenya to his African visit, but it is still uncertain because there are organizational problems. And to the business of the day, 25,000 strong multinational stand force, that's the number of men expected to gather for training in South Africa as part of the AU's readiness to take charge of the security challenges in the continent. The training, which is set to begin for the first time, is to ensure the readiness of the force by January 2016 to respond to crisis across the continent. The force will be made up of 5 brigades from Africa's economic blocs. It is being set up to avoid reliance on the outside world in peacekeeping across the continent. The training kicks off at South African Army Combat Training Center in Lohatla with an opening ceremony on Monday. Jide Okeke is the Chief Policy Development Unit Peace Support Operations at the African Union. He joins me now on Network Africa. Well, thank you for making out time to speak to us on the program. Tell us more about this troop. We understand the force will be made up of 5 brigades from Africa's economic blocs. What more do we know?
Good evening, Josh. It could be quite misleading to consider this force, which we've called or referred to as the African Standby Force, to be made up of just military capabilities. Actually, we are trying to develop a multi-dimensional capacity composed of civilian, police, and military entities. And in so doing, we are trying to test or validate the operational readiness of this mechanism to be, as you rightly pointed out, to be able to respond to crisis on the continent. And the number of 25,000 is derived from the 5 regional economic communities as well as the regional mechanisms that are officially recognized by the African Union Commission. They are composed of SADC, which is in the south, ECAS, Central African Republic, East Africa, which is referred to as the East African Standby Force, and the North African Regional Capability. We also have, of course, in our region, ECOWAS. Military personnel estimated to be about 5,000 from each region will be deployed. So also will be police as well as civilian capacities. So the numbers way exceeds 25,000, as you rightly pointed out.
But in general, just give it as an estimate. We're going to have up to 30,000, 50,000, because of course it does matter the number of men who will be overlooking the affairs and security of the whole of the continent.
Actually, it's composed of both women and men, I have to say.
Okay.
25,000 military personnel from the 5 regions, but also we have about 720 police officers from each region. And we are expected to have 300 civilians from each region as well. So we're looking at numbers that are estimated to be around 32,000.
Okay, so what informed the congregation of this multinational force at this time? A lot of people are asking.
Well, the idea of the African Standby Force is as old as the establishment of the African Union itself. However, I would just simply refer you to 2013 when a decision was made by the African Union heads of state and government to assess the African Standby Force. And this assessment was led by our own Professor Ibrahim Gambari. The assessment covered 3 aspects. They wanted to look at the progress that has been made towards the full operational capability of the African Standby Force by the end of 2015. Also, they wanted to identify challenges that we have encountered in the last 10 years in our efforts towards operationalizing the African Standby Force, and to come up with concrete recommendations that would ensure that by the end of 2015, we would aspire to or actualize our intention to fully operationalize the African Standby Force. So that is the closest history in that regard. Professor Ibrahim Gambari's panel further developed a plan of action that we had to implement in order to ensure that we would attain full operational capability by the end of 2015. I'm pleased to inform you that most of the aspects or activities contained in this plan of action have been implemented. And so the exercise in Luhatla, South Africa, is to validate the operational readiness of the African Standby Force in relation to the plan of action that has been developed.
Okay, so this isn't exactly the first time that they will be practicing and pretty much warming up for this exercise, because the reports say this is the first time they're actually all coming together to warm up ahead of the peacekeeping operations, if you'd like to put it that way.
I would fully agree with you. In 2005, you'll recall that the first exercise was conducted. And the main outcome of that exercise in 2005 was to actually test the policies that have been developed towards the operationalization of the African Standby Force. What we are currently doing is to test the full spectrum for deployment, right from when we expected to deploy rapidly to when we deploy a multi-dimensional peace support operations. And so therefore, we are testing our ability to plan, our mission support concept, but also the implementation of our policies. So this is the entire, I guess the reason why there has been quite a number of emphasis that this is the first exercise we're conducting is because this is the first time we're testing the entirety of our multidimensional operations or of the African Standby Force.
So before I let you go, what would be the modus operandi of these forces? We understand that most of them could or enter into countries uninvited to check out cases of genocide, crimes against humanity. Is this the way it would really be run?
I think that will be quite misleading, Josh.
Okay.
The deployment of the African Standby Force would be dependent on a political decision by the African Union member states. So in that regard, it will be difficult for us to have what you could describe as a unilateral intervention without an authorization from member states. Okay. In cases of genocide or other forms of mass atrocity crimes, it would actually require a 2/3 majority of the 54 member states. So we are talking about 36 member states approving such a deployment. So it will be difficult for us to get to a situation where we would require, we would have a deployment without the authorization of our own member states.
Okay, so let me ask you, Jide. You are the Chief Policy Development at the Unit of Peace Support Operations at the AU. You understand also that there is an ongoing war against Boko Haram in this part of the world, and there is already forces are coming together in this region, Chad, Nigeria, Niger, to form, to form a military base that would fight this terrorists. Are you planning to send, is this AU training, these forces that we're talking about, going to be participating in this war against Boko Haram, or is just not being considered?
The case of the Multinational Joint Task Force against Boko Haram is quite peculiar. And if you recall, on the 29th of January this year, the Peace and Security Council of the African Union authorized the deployment of the MNJTF. What we are doing as the African Union Commission is to support the LCBC, the Lake Chad Basin Commission, in their efforts towards deploying a force that will be composed primarily of the Lake Chad Basin Commission member states, but as well as Benin. So in that context, the African Standby Force, as the continental planning element, or here within PSOD, will be supporting that deployment, but there wouldn't be boots on the ground, as sometimes has been considered or has been assumed.
Okay, thank you so much, Jide Okeke, speaking to us there from Addis Ababa. He's the Chief Policy Development for the Unit of Peace Support Operations at the African Union. Thank you so much for shedding light on this topic that we are talking seriously about. A battalion of Sudanese troops have arrived in Yemen's southern port city of Aden. They are there to bolster Saudi-led Arab forces trying to keep out the Iran-backed Houthis and curb the growing presence of Islamist militants. A military source in Aden said that 300 Sudanese soldiers and officers arrived by sea on Saturday, and their purpose was to help maintain security for the city against the Houthis and Saleh. Aden is a strategic port and shipping hub, and it became the seat of the Yemeni government earlier this year, after the Houthis, a clan from northern Yemen, seized the capital, Sana'a, and forced President Abdurrahman Mansur Hadi to flee to the south. Let's take a short break on Network Africa, and when we come back, low turnout characterizes Egypt's parliamentary elections as voting enters day 2.